Hello there, I'm Gary. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. So today is a bonus build. I didn't have this scheduled, but I needed to put it into the schedule at short notice because it arrived in the week and I wanted to get it done. So the kit I have done for you is the brand new, like less than a week old, Gloster Meteor F8 in 1/72nd scale from AIRFIX. Now, you'll know if you've seen my channel before, I've already made the F8 Meteor in 1/48. What a lovely kit that was. This is a scaled down version. Presumably, in many ways, the design elements can be scaled down and then reconfigured for the thickness of the plastic and da-da-da-da-da. Essentially, it's probably the same basic scans and things like that, but shrunk down and a bit of adaptation made for the scale. Now, because this is a bonus, I'm not going to be doing separate days of box building, and the build of the aircraft. So I'm going to just do the box opening first. Let's see a bit about the history of Meteor F8 and Meteors in general in the marketplace. Of course, this is a brand new tooling, so I can't tell you about the history of this exact kit. Then I'll have a look at what you get inside the box for your money. Then I'll show you how to put it all together. These bits will come as chapters. You can hop backwards and forwards, skip, go back, rewatch, whatever you like at your heart's content. If you enjoy it, and I really hope you do because I've put a lot of effort into this one, thumbs up, like it, subscribe, hit the bell if you haven't done so already. And of course, you know you can contribute to keeping the channel going through one of the many partner programs. So enough of all of this, let's go on straight away and have a look at the history of the Meteor F8 in 1/72nd scale. This 2022 new tool of the Meteor F8 is the first one designed at AIRFIX in 1/72nd scale. Previously available was an F8 Meteor in 2009 and as an AIRFIX Club Special Kit in 2012, but these both derived from the MPM tooling of the FR9 in 2006. This kit also spawned the Extra Kit version in 2006 and the Special Hobby F8 in 2022. With various changes to the parts, the original MPM mould has been seen in most versions of the aircraft, including the Mark I Meteor kit released in 2011, the Mark III, the Mark IV, including a rebox by Revell and one by Special Hobby, the PR-10 Photo Reconnaissance aircraft, the NF-11, NF-12, and NF-14 night and all-weather fighters, the T-7 trainer, the turboprop powered Trent Meteor, and the unique prone pilot conversion of the F8, one of which I've already built for this channel. Other companies that had made Meteor F8s in 1/72nd include Frog, dating all the way back to 1955, PJ Production in 1995, Merlin Models in the 1980s, in resin from CMR in 1998, and in vac form from Rareplane in 1980. Of course, this release uses much of the design data from the very successful releases of the Meteor F8 in 1/48th scale from AIRFIX. A build of the F8 Korea kit is also available on this channel. Beautifully dramatic box art as usual, this time of 3 Meteors wheeling over Malta, over Valletta, I think, in Malta. Anyway, let's see what we get inside the box. Top loading box, as is usual for AIRFIX. Inside here, big bag containing 4 grey sprues and 1 clear sprue. We'll have a look at those in some detail. There's an instruction sheet, A4, full size, looks very much to the usual AIRFIX standard. Again, we'll have a look in a moment. And Of course, the decal sheet for 3 different options, 2 Royal Air Force and 1 Belgian Air Force, which is rather exciting. We'll have a look at those as well in a bit more detail. Frame A, or sprue A, contains the fuselage halves, engine exhaust, I think the main spars with engine exhaust and intakes, and some fairings for the engines. Frame B, or sprue B, is simply the wings, single piece bottom surface and 2-piece top surface. Frame C, a bit more of the detail here. So this is the rudder, fin components, and elevators, ailerons, wing tanks, front of the engine, exhaust pipes, the side detail for the cockpit, belly fuel tank here, and this is a single piece. If you want the undercarriage retracted, you're showing the aircraft in flight, this is a single piece, so you don't have to worry about fitting doors and things like that, and the cockpit floor, of course. And sprue D is essentially everything else: wheels, nose, engine parts, yeah, all the bits for the undercarriage, air brakes, doors, back of the cockpit, pilots, all the other bits and pieces. Don't know what these are. These inserts are for the wings. I'm not sure about that. Probably for the undercarriage bay, thinking about it. Pylons for the fuel tanks. And a frame called F2, which obviously makes you think what happened to E and F1. I'm sure in a future release we'll find out. 2 different canopy designs, windshield, common windshield. These big windows, I'm guessing those are for a reconnaissance FR9 version that will come out soon. Landing lights, ID light and gun sights. Having a closer look at the plastic, the detailing is very fine. It's actually unusually fine for an AIRFIX kit. It's a lot shallower than they've done on a lot of kits recently. Note the underside and the top side, you can have the air brakes open or closed. Ailerons, excellent. No option for having the flaps down. The interior of the wheel wells looks decent enough. On the wing we have drill holes for rockets, so there will be another box of this with rockets. These 2 here are for underwing fuel tanks, of course. Here you've got 3 pinholes for the belly fuel tank if you want them, and these will be for the optional stands, of course. Looking at frame D, there's the nose cone. This is obviously the F8 nose cone with the cutouts for the guns. There will no doubt be an FR9 or 10 version, longer nose with the square windows, which of course they already supply. This sprue, how it does cause me a bit of concern. Look how thick these, and how many of these nibs there are here on these parts. And you can see here there's flash. This is a brand new tool, and there's really, should there be flash in the corners here? It looks very shiny as well, feels very gloss, very shiny. I am definitely washing these before I do anything with them, because I do think there's been a bit of release oil or something used. The pilot figure is properly tiny. I know Meteor pilots didn't run so much, but that is a very, very small pilot figure. And again, look how shiny it is. Not that well molded, I'm afraid. I don't know if they have like a stock of pilot figures already in 3D and they just whack it into the sprue to save having to redesign one. But that is a very small figure. Let me see if I've got another one to compare it with. It's really difficult finding an AIRFIX kit in my stash that has got a pilot figure. Anyway, there we go. That's on the left here is the pilot figure from the Wildcat. And on the right here is the bone-domed Meteor pilot. I think the Meteor pilot looks actually significantly smaller. If I try and put them as close as I can to side by side, and you can still see them. I think you'll agree that the Meteor pilot is quite a bit smaller. It's not, it just stands out when you look at the kit. When you look at the sprue, you think, wow, that's small. The other thing is this grey plastic here. I really like this grey plastic. It's sharp, it's crisp, it feels good, it looks absolutely razor sharp. Whereas this plastic, I don't know if it's, I have to find out, maybe it's partly recycled, or you know, I can't get the usual plastic for some other reason, but it just doesn't look or feel the same. It looks so shiny. It's very odd. Very, very odd indeed. The instructions booklet, really, it's not a sheet, it's a booklet, is fairly typical of modern AIRFIX. First page is just the history of the aircraft in 5 languages, assembly instructions, interpretation of what all the symbols mean, and then the instructions themselves, as usual, very nicely drawn, nicely shaded, red bits to show you bits that have been used or built previously, red squares for decal numbers. As usual, paint numbers are on here, so I'll go through. I know 85 is something like matte black or something. I can't remember what 109 is. I'll have to go through and just mark those up. Transparent plants are in blue as well, so that's the gun sight, which looks actually quite nicely done. Anything else? No, I think that's probably about it. I don't know if we... Oh, yes, we do. We have to add 8 grams of weight in here. So we'll see how we go about doing that, because it can be a bit cramped if it hasn't been designed terribly well. Yep, everything else is pretty much as normal. All the various options. Different canopies. The Belgian aircraft had a different canopy to the RAF aircraft, I believe. No, wrong, sorry. The Belgian one had the same one. It was the F8 of 74 squadron's got the complete clear canopy, and these ones have got the blanked off canopy. Anyway, we'll have a look at the markings in a bit. Yeah, that's all there. On to the markings then, and Scheme A is for an aircraft of 500 Squadron, County of Kent Squadron, Royal Auxiliary Air Force in 1953. I'm guessing that's coming up to Coronation Day markings. This is the squadron leader's aircraft with the fancy blue tail. That's the scheme that's on the box. Scheme B is an aircraft from 74 Fighter Squadron, RAF, in 1955. 74 is one of the Tiger squadrons that has a Tiger logo and the black and yellow markings on here. And this is the one with the all-round clear canopy. And finally, because AIRFIX like to mix up the schemes a bit and find one that's slightly off the wall or slightly unusual, here's one from 350 Squadron of the Belgian Air Force at Beauvaisin in the early 50s. No, the Belgian Air Force insignia and the sort of flaming logo at the front, which is very nice. This one's quite tempting, I have to say. This one's tempting. And then, of course, these stencil layouts. Now, you know me, I like a stencil as much as the next man, providing the next man is someone who really doesn't like too many stencils. There are a lot of these. I'm trying to see where we go up to. I'm getting 83, up to number 83, I think. At the moment, oh, 86. Any advance on 86? No, that seems to be 86. That's a lot of stencils to be putting in. Some of them, you know, are sensible. That's fine. Those are catches and they have little stencil markings on them. But there are 16 of those, 8 on each side. That's quite a lot. This is 1/72nd, so we'll see how we go with these. Some of them may or may not make it to the final cut, as it were. But we'll do our best. We'll do our best, as I say. Okay, that's all of those. And then indeed, the decals, here they are. Common ones include these masses and masses. Oh, that goes up to 89. Masses of stencils. 1, 2 and 3 are cockpit things, I think. 1 definitely is. I think 2 and 3 are for the cockpit. Everything else is for the surface. That's a lot of stencils to do. Up here in the top right are the common roundels and fin flashes for the 2 RAF aircraft, schemes A and B. Scheme A has got 500 squadrons wavy lines and the ID. And here is scheme B, 74 Tiger Squadron with its red and black markings. And at the bottom is scheme C, the Royal Belgian Air Force aircraft colours. Okay, this is as close as I can get my camera to focus. Something for some scale is maybe my pencil here. You can therefore see these are really, really, really tiny. I mean, honestly, I don't know what I'm going to do here. I can't even read some of these. You know, they are cartograph. They are very fine. They are very beautifully rich in colour. I mean, these Belgian colours are so nice. That yellow is very, very good. And yellow's often a very tricky little colour to get right. The blue and green here of the Kentish aircraft. Very smart indeed. Definition in the tiger faces there. Very good. Do you know what? We'll see what we can do. I mean, a lot of these, once they're on a silver background, I do wonder how many of these are even going to be intelligible, or whether you'd know that they were there or not. I suspect some of these are in the realm of, if you're going into a competition, you have to have them. You know, if you don't, then you might not actually miss some of these. We'll see, though. Right, so first thing, I've painted this side in black. I'm just going to dry brush them. You can, if you do it on the sprue, you can test out whether the brush is ready just by trying to raise out some of these numbers on here. That seems pretty good. So let's just dry brush in a little bit of this wire detail here. I mean, don't have to be too much, because I'm going to have a closed cockpit on this one, so you know, a lot of this stuff isn't going to be seen, but it just makes me happy that I've done it. So anything to keep myself happy is good. And it's also a good practice. Always practice. Whenever you've got things like this where you can practice your skills, practice them, because there's going to be a project before too long where this sort of thing is going to be really useful. And if you haven't practiced it, it's not going to look great when you come to doing it for real. Just doing the floor there as well. While I'm at it, I might as well do things like just getting a bit of detail on the side of the ejection seats here. And a little bit of detail on this. This thing goes on the back. Not going to worry about the instrument panel there, because we've got a part for the instrument panel. You've got a decal for it. Sorry. So that's all that for the moment. Let's put all that together. Right, the decal just goes straight on. We put some decal fix, or in my case microsol, in there just to make sure it sits properly, and then just fiddle around to get it to sit where you want it. Pretty much like that, in fact. Let's flood a bit more decal fix on there for it to settle into the piece a bit, and let that dry. Right, so the two halves of the cockpit go together straightforwardly. They just get in touch at the back there, and then this tub sits on the cockpit floor with these tabs through these slots. It's a bit of a fiddle, but there we go, they get in eventually. So the ejection seat comes in two halves. We just simply push those together like this, and then the actual seat insert goes in like that. Just a quick word, this colour here, on the instructions it calls it 109. I can't see 109 on the current list on the Humbrol. So it's in the enamels one as World War I blue. Maybe it's like a French uniform blue or something. I've just put in this blue. I'll find out which one it is. It's the one you use for the NHS Hawk. That's why I got it actually. So I'll put down here what the number is on that. So that's what I'm using. Yeah, just after the war they had this strange phase of going through blue bits of equipment, blue straps and blue seats and all the rest of it. Very odd. Anyway, we then, on the top of that, we have the initiator handle, which is lovely for a 1/72 scale. That's actually quite nice. I'm just going to paint that red again. Early Martin Baker seats, instead of the yellow and black hazing that they had from like the mid 60s-ish, I think, early to mid 60s. The very early ones were just red, so I'll paint that up. And as usual, when I'm painting red over black, I always put white down first. Red or yellow, if they're going on black, I always undercoat it with white. Otherwise you're just not going to get that red or indeed yellow to stand out. So, you know, like propeller tips, for example, always white, then yellow. And anything red like this, if I'm putting red lights in a cockpit, I want some switches to be red, they go white first, then the red on top. There we go. It's just putting this this little decal on here. There's like a line, I think it's the gas gun, I can't remember the anatomy of the seat very well, but it's a big thing here, and then there's this sign, so I don't know quite how it's supposed to sit in place. I can't see it going over a major part of the structure like that. Anyway, they'll sit there, they'll look okay, especially through a window, but I'm not 100% convinced about that decal. Then at the back of the seat is actually it's a launch rail, if you think about it. I suppose it's the rail you will ride if you want to get on this seat and go somewhere quick. It rides up that rail, and that's a structural thing that goes into the cockpit. Okay, so the seat assembly goes into the back of the cockpit. It is a tight squeeze, but it does go in. And the control column goes in as well. Okay, then the instrument panel slots into place at the front here. know if you saw that actually now. So yeah, just this slots in here and against that there. Right, you see this peg shaped thing here? Well, there's a gap on the back there that has to fit on top and go right against the back like that. I'm holding this on the back of a sanding stick with a little bit of blue tack because this is really fiddly. This is the body of the gun sight going on to the transparency for the gun sight like that. Very fiddly. I'll let that dry. Okay, so the gun sight sits in a little sort of pocket at the back of the instrument panel like that. Okay, so the glass is just popping up over the top there, and there we go, like that. If you're having the undercarriage down, as I am, you need to put this piece in. Now, if you're having the undercarriage up, you don't need it because it's hidden away. This is part of the wheel well. That sort of bulgy thing there is where the nose wheel sits. Okay, so that goes in, just a bit of glue to keep it in place. I've pre-painted the inside silver, not quite sure why, but the instructions say to do it, so I have. And then this whole piece sits into the cockpit thus. It says 8 grams, I'm going to put 5 grams here and then 5 grams on here. The pivot point for the wheels is about here, so the fact it's like 5 is here instead of here, we should be okay. We should be okay. Okay, so what I've done is I've got a couple of these bicycle wheel balance weights. There's one under here and there's one sort of stuck on there. They've got these sticky pads, self-adhesive sticky pads. I find them really useful when you've got a bit of room like this. That between them's 10 grams of 5 each. So that should be enough with the pivot point around here to keep the nose down. The other thing, if you're having the undercarriage up, you need, there's a piece that fits here. You won't have this piece in because you don't need it, it says so. And there's a filler that goes in here, the gear doors. But I'm having the gear down, so leave that open with that in place. The other thing we have to do before we close the halves of the fuselage is put the rudder in, which goes there, like that. Then we can put the two halves of the fuselage together. Well, it might look something like a fish or something like that out of water, but at the moment it is drying. The two sides are clamped up actually really well. The joints look really nice. I don't think there's going to be much in the way of filling done here. And it all looks fine. Very happy with progress. I'll leave this alone. In fact, I'll leave this alone overnight. I've had a long day doing other things as well. So onto the wings, and first thing to do in the bottom half of the wing is drill out the holes we're going to need. Now, there's 2 here for the stands, there's these 3 here for the underbelly tank, there's these 2 here on each wing for the under wing tanks, and there are holes there for rockets, which is for a future release. So all I'm going to do, because I'm only having the belly tank, is drill out these 3 holes here. These use a 1mm drill bit. So onto the wings then, and first thing we're going to do is paint the inside of the engine bays and the inlets and exhausts and all that. All of that gets painted with aluminium. Now I've used a Vallejo aluminium air, which actually brushes, I think, really nicely. Anyway, if you're doing, by the way, if you're doing a wheels up version, the aircraft in flight, there's a single piece that blanks off across here to do both undercarriage wells in one piece. I'm doing the gear down, so obviously I'm not using that. What we do have to do, however, is put a couple of spars in, and these go, one goes across here, like so. You can see it's like follows the leading edge of the wing. And the other spar sits in here thus, and that forms the way up. Gary, read the manual. That forms the other end of the undercarriage bay, like this. Okay, I'll glue those in now. Now the side walls of the gear bays go in, and there's like a little notch for them to go into there at the front, and also under the rear, like that. So don't know if you can see, it's the sidewall slots into the back of this splitter here, and also into the back part here. There's a little notch there that it sits into, and that's really very solid. On the other side of the wheel well, the wall just slots in into the top. And on each side there's an exhaust pipe behind the turbine, and these just go together in halves. And got fat sausage fingers like mine, and they're a bit fiddly. There you go. They just fit together like that, and you can just glue them up. Don't worry too much about the outside look, because you ain't going to see them again, but just make sure they're nice and tightly clamped when you glue them. Right, the exhaust. Now on the exhaust they have these little pegs at the back. One is a little bit bigger than the other. Now I put the larger peg on the outside, and there's a locator pin here that sort of snuggles up into a little groove on the back of the turbine disc, and that's where that sits. And it's the same for the other side. Larger tab at the tail here sits on the inside, and that just sort of sits in nicely like so. And just a very quick word about the front disc of the engine here. The instructions say just paint it 56, which I think is aluminium. Just paint the whole thing aluminium. It isn't all aluminium. So what I've done is I've painted a ring of black around here, which is the grill for the inlet. Painted aluminium on the framing here. All of that is on the kit, you can see it, so don't worry about it. Aluminium on the top here, and then all I've done is these other parts, I've just got the aluminium and added just a little bit of black to make slightly darker aluminium, and then a bit more black to make darker steel, gunmetal, sort of stuff. Just mix it up and match it up. It just makes it look different from the front rather than just a blank sheet of aluminium. Anyway, those go into the wing. There is a small little notch here that goes into, or this little tab here goes into that notch, so the engines both sit the same way, like so. So the engine discs sit in here. Round a bit more, there we go, like that. Okay, so they sit into this groove here with that notch, and also the front touches up against the spar here, this splitter bar on the spar. Okay, so what that means from the front, you'll get quite a nice sort of patterned look. You don't just get a blank sheet of aluminium looking at you. And the last thing before we close up the wing, there's this wing light here, ID light, whatever you call it. That just sits in there, and we get the tiniest little spot of extra thin cement, like that, and leave that alone to dry. Now I'm going to paint the back of this in silver paint, or aluminium paint actually, because it seems more shiny. One of my viewers, Julian, has suggested for the back of lamps, to make them more reflective, sticking a bit of aluminium foil on there, which sounds like a really good idea. If you like a dab of PVA either side here and here, and then a strip of foil either, will look great. The only reason I'm not doing it this time is right in the middle of this glass here is a little dimple, and if you paint it, what that looks like from the other side is a bulb within a reflector. But otherwise, if that was just a flat light with nothing on the other side, that would sound like a brilliant trick, and I will do that, Julian. I promise you, I will try that on a model very soon. Then, when you're ready, the upper halves of the wings can go on. These slot nicely into place. The fit is very good. There's a couple of parts there. I'll just add a bit of tape to. So what I always do is I put some glue on the pins, the locator pins, and then go around, bit of tape, bit of clamps, get everything just right, and then go around all the edges with extra thin cement. And on the fuselage at the rear of the wing root, there's this little fillet that needs to go in. This is always a sure sign of many variants to come in the future, where you've got little bits of filler to put. There's no reason why that couldn't have been moulded originally. While I'm waiting for the wings to completely dry, I'll put the ailerons together. Now the A and C schemes, so the 1953 RAF one and the Belgium one, both the silver schemes actually, have the ailerons. They have this larger trim tab on them. The B scheme, the slightly later RAF one, 74 Squadron one, has a smaller trim tab, just to make sure you're putting the right one on. Now we're going to fit the wing to the fuselage now, the fuselage to the wing, depending on your point of view. Now, I always do a dry fit. Okay, so when I first did a dry fit of this, then this part here at the front of the joint wasn't sitting completely flush. Okay, now I don't know if that's a thing with the kit or whether it's a thing with the way I've made it. I don't know. Probably the latter, because everything else has gone actually remarkably well. So all I did was I got a sort of needle file and just filed down here, just in here, the edges of these joints. This is I think it's one of it's the inside of the wheel well parts we put in earlier. Do you know, these just hook over the spars, so it might be I just didn't push them down hard enough or whatever, but just quick go over with a needle file either side, and now it fits beautifully. So the wing goes on like so and sits into place. At the back, you just have to negotiate them around that fillet we put in, but once it's there, I have to say that is a pretty damned good fit. I'm very happy with that. I can just tape it up to make sure all the surfaces are absolutely spot on, and then glue it up. But I think it's pretty good. So on each wing we put in an aileron. Now they sit with the trim tab, the piece with the trim tabs that goes on the bottom. Okay, so it's got quite a well-defined bit here. The other side has a little actuator, so the actuator goes underneath. Okay, that tells you which way round it is, if you have forgotten. And of course, we also need to put on our engine nacelles here. They slot in here along there. So we'll just make sure we get those nicely fitted up first before we glue anything. Okay, same that other side, and that's that for the moment. Right, so next on the list is the tailplane horizontal stabilizer. If you will, it comes in two halves and they stick into the fin. Now, nice design, here we go. P and S, port and starboard. You know which one is which, that's excellent. Where they're engraved with the P and S actually fits inside the fin, so you'll never see them again. And finally, tab and hook place for a tab. The two horizontal stabilizers connect through the fin and thus setting the completely flat angle of them. Really, really thoughtful and clever design work. Well done. I suspect this was Paramjet. If it was Paramjet, mate, really great little touch that. So we have the two halves of the tailplane. They slot in here. You can see the P and the S, port and starboard, get hidden. So push them together and just make sure they're centered properly. And that's it, done. Then the elevators can go into the back of the tailplane, horizontal stabilizer if you must. Now remember when we said that there's the tab on these exhaust pipes and that the bigger tab goes on the inside, small one on the outside? This is where it's important because the exhaust nozzle here has a bigger tab on the inside and a smaller tab on the outside. So it fits in exactly the right place, like that. And while we're doing bits and pieces, we can put the underwing fuel tank in. Remember, we pre-drilled the 3 holes for it to fit, and it fits good and snugly. We'll do the undercarriage now. So this is the first part that goes into this back plate. Let's make sure those are all in where they belong. Okay, and then this bracing leg goes in above it, like so, and connects up at the back here. We just dab a bit of glue to seal those in. The moment it's dried, we'll paint all this aluminium. The nose cone is in 2 halves. They simply sit together like this. They're a bit fiddly because there's only a tiny bonding surface at the bottom. So if you squeeze too tightly, it'll just fall apart. So just leave it like that for the moment. And then the nose gear undercarriage sits inside the nose cone like this. It's a tricky little fit, but it will go in. There you go, like this. And then when it's all done, you can just fit the nose cone onto the nose of the aircraft, front of the aircraft. Oh, and by the way, this this nose wheel strut here, that's just going to break. That's sticking out underneath the plane. That's just going to break. That really would have thought that part could have been done in a different way, because that is just going to break off soon. Anyway, so nacelles are taped up. Tanks taped on, nose is taped on, everything's taped on, and I'm going to leave everything alone and go and have a spot of lunch. In the back of the canopy, there's this little structure that goes in there. It's really difficult to place with any accuracy, but just keep it. It will sit there eventually, but you know what, it's a pain in the backside to get there. Here we go. Before it moves, a tiny, tiny, tiny drop of extra thin, cement. We'll keep it in place. and let that dry really well before you do anything more, because we don't want the fumes getting onto the inside of the canopy there where we've masked it off. Then there's this tiny piece that fits into the front windshield. The speed brakes go into these recesses. You can have them open or closed. I'm going to have mine open. So with everything in place, I've just put a bit of canopy glue in there, which is just like white PVA basically, but anyway, it dries clear and doesn't leave any residue, and it also fills up any gaps that we might get accidentally, which is jolly nice. So this canopy kind of clicks into place, which is nice. It's got a decent kind of solid feel to it, which is good. That's the windshield in place, and the canopy just sits in place next to it, like so. And we let those dry, then we can spray the whole thing with our base coat of black and then our top coat of aluminium. There are 4 chutes for empty shell cases to go on. 2 longer ones at the front here and 2 shorter ones immediately behind. These were just to eject the used 20mm shell casings away from the aircraft to prevent them bouncing around and hitting anything vital actually. So just quickly do those. Right, for the paint, the first thing I'm going to do is lay down a black gloss primer coat. So what I've done is I've coated it all in the surface primer, which is this one. It's gloss black acrylic polyurethane surface primer, and then I've used this metal colour aluminium for the top coat, but I've also used a slightly darker aluminium just sort of strategically around, just to sort of break it up a bit. Let that dry. A bit of gloss on top, and I'm going to leave that well alone now. I'm going to get on with painting the tyres, and the tyres get painted with dark rubber. Right, I've given this coats of aluminium, and I've given it a gloss coat as well, and so I'm just going to put on some decals now. I'm doing the Belgian Air Force aircraft. So decal fix, and then the decal on top. There we go. Yeah. Right, so that's the first set of decals done. These are the ones that are just specific to the aircraft, the Belgian aircraft, which is Scheme C. Now, there are a lot of common stencils. Okay, how many of these you do is your decision. Let's get that quite clear. Whatever you do to your kits is your decision, and don't let anyone tell you you've done something wrong or whatever, because you haven't. You've just done it your way. Now, for me, definitely these black things over the wings are important. Ejection seat markings, hood releases, things like that. Generally speaking, I'm going anything with a different colour, with like coloured backgrounds. The fuel tank markings here look pretty cool. Some of these, there's a whole string of things here which are just basically the latches along there, but they look nice if you do those. After a while, you get some of these are like under the trailing edge of the wings, under the trailing edge of the wing. Now, if you're not going to see it, it's up to you whether you put it there or not. I'm going to try and put on all of these because I run a YouTube channel and that's what I'm supposed to do. but do just have a look at the size of these, have a look at how much time they're going to take you to fit them, and then think, how am I going to be looking at this? How is it going to be displayed? How am I going to interact with it? And if you want to leave a few out, leave a few out. No one's going to know, no one's going to care, and as long as you're happy with your kit, that's the end of that. I'm going to try to put all of these on, however, so wish me luck. This could take about a day and a half. Okay, homing in on what I think is the smallest of these stencils here. This is here at the end of my knife tip here. That is less than a millimetre long. It's about, I'd say about 0.7, 0.8 of a millimetre long. It goes on the pilot step, which on the stencil placing sheet is shown as being deployed, but of course on this kit you don't get the option to deploy it, but there we go. They probably reused stuff from the F8 in 1/48 for this. So yeah, you've got to decide whether your paint job is good enough and clean enough, your eyesight's good enough to actually pick that out. If it is, then AIRFIX have provided it, so bravo AIRFIX. If it isn't, who's going to know? I'm just saying. Right, so having spent the last hour and a half on decals on the top of the aircraft, I'll get back to construction. I'm going to do the undercarriage. Now, the undercarriage is kind of interesting design here. The Meteor had these big mudguard sort of things. So what they've done is they said, okay, we'll split the mudguards, but we'll split the wheels as well. So you paint them separately, obviously, paint them up separately, and then sort of slot one into the other. And you know, that kind of looks cool, but then you do those as halves and then you join the whole lot together. So that's going to be interesting. I've got to clean up this because this is covered in tiny bits of flash, which is very annoying, actually. So you've got like 4 pieces to make one front wheel. I get why it's been done like this. It's still not going to go. I do honestly get why, but is it worth the effort? Is it worth the difference? Why just have like a cast wheel? And anyway, I'm going to try and figure out how to get these things to sit together properly. They're really tight, so I'm going to have to go away and do something about that. I'll be back in a moment. Okay, let's talk about these wheels here for a second. You know, they go together eventually. Cool things. Let's talk about the good things first. The struts here are different widths, so the holes are different widths, which means the tyre insert sits exactly right for the flat spot of the weighting. Very nicely designed, very good. Downsides, getting them to sit together is really difficult if you've done any pre-painting at all. To be fair, I thought, you know, part of this whole idea was to be that you could pre-paint and then just lock it together and then, hey presto, you're done. And it's really difficult because there is quite a lot of flash on. It's tiny. It's just where the two halves of the mould have met. There's just a little ridge, but those little ridges do make a difference, especially if you've pre-painted anything. So don't pre-paint them. Okay, it's my first suggestion. Even when I've pre-painted, taken the paint off and pushed and hold whatever I can't get these to close, so I'm going to just forget about it and fill it. I need to make another one of these without any paint on them first to give an opinion as to whether this is really good or not, but I'm not entirely convinced. I'm also really not convinced about the strength of this little bit here. I know the Meteor nose wheel was pretty spindly, but I'm not sure this is all going to work when it goes together. But we'll check it out. We'll check it out. That may just be a brace, and there's a big old wheel that goes on here. I'm hoping the wheel will go on because these still don't want to set. I'll crush those together as much as I can, and then we'll see how we go. So the intent is absolutely very, very, very good. Great idea, great way of getting the flat spots where you want them. Great way of dealing with these silly mud flaps that the Meteor had. But unfortunately, if you pre-paint them, it really does seem to mess up the tolerances completely. So here's the lesson: don't pre-paint the wheels on your Meteor. Okay, nose gear first. So we have, this is a bit I should have put in earlier, but I didn't because I didn't want it to break. And you know what, the bit that was in there that broke anyway. So I'm going to just get this piece, this nose leg, into place, like about there. Now then, you remember me saying there was another tiny piece inside. I said that's going to break. It did break. Fortunately, I found it, and so I can now put it in if I'm really, really, really careful. There's another kit I made that had this problem. It's like one piece that sort of sat underneath the aircraft. That time it's the main gear, not the nose gear. And I thought that piece is going to break, and it did. I can't remember what it was now, what plane it was. It's in my videos, good listeners, good viewers. It is one of my videos. The nose wheel assembly sits inside the fork at the bottom of the leg, and the small oleo leg attaches in the front. The main gear is fiddly, to say the least. A small tab sits in a hole at the front outer corner of the gear bay, then a large tab on the leg sits in a hole in the outer wall. The leg kind of sits across the frame at the bottom here. There's a crosspiece that operates the gear leg and the inner gear door. One end goes into a small slot in the inner gear wall here. It takes a bit of tweezer skill. At the other end, the bottom cross member sits at the base of the gear leg, and the upper hinge goes into a slot at the back of the gear leg. The inner gear doors simply sit on the inside edge and meet up with a piece of the crosspiece we saw earlier. The outer gear door hooks into place and sits between the gear leg and the engine nacelle. For the nose gear doors, there's a small crosspiece to put in first, then the door sits along the bay edge and against the crosspiece. Then there is a door piece on the nose gear leg. The instructions say there's a tab on the leg to locate this, and there is a slot for the tab on the back of the door, but the tab seems to be missing. Now, I'm not sure if that's a mould issue or whether it got missed off in design, but I'm not waiting for a new part, so I'll just lean the door against the leg. Then we just add the last few bits and pieces and the kit is complete. First of all, I think this is a lovely kit overall. Some of the design, like the tailplane, is inspired. The issue with the undercarriage can be dealt with by cleaning the parts well and not pre-painting them. Otherwise, the fit generally is very good and shouldn't present any major issues to any modeller, and the final result is a nice representation of a classic aircraft. My only advice is really to make sure you check all the pieces, as there were some mould marks that were troublesome that I wasn't really expecting on a brand new tooling. Just sand them off and you're fine. Would I build one again? Absolutely yes I would, but probably with the gear up. I'm looking forward to the future releases. The FR9 reconnaissance aircraft is absolutely going to happen, and then a ground attack version with rockets, a bit like the releases for the 148th kit. There we go, a nice kit. Let's get that done straight away. It's a nice kit. There are some issues, a few things you need to watch out for and be prepared for, a few things that you think, do you know what, guys, maybe you could have done this better. You can make your own mind up. Look, if you build this kit and you don't agree with what I say, please, please, please let me know in the comments. Let's have a conversation about it. Maybe there's a way you've found doing something I've missed out on, which is entirely possible, let's be honest. Share it with everyone else in the community. That would be really cool. In any case, back to normal on Monday with Monday Matters. Back to the usual build schedule as well, with almost told you what the kit of the week is. Come back on Monday Matters to find out. In any case, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon. Take care now. Goodbye.